As an ordinary alpha, I had been scrimping and saving my wife fund for years. My only luxury was the hope that by the time I turned 30, I'd be assigned a soft, delicate Omega as a wife. But all I got after waiting and waiting was someone tall, imposing, and exuding an icy aura, Enigma. One by one, the lights in the office went out as colleagues laughed and chatted while packing up to leave. When someone from the marketing department dropped a stack of files on my desk, they didn't even glance at me. "Forrest, these are for tomorrow's meeting. Can you help organize them?" I nodded. Before I could even say, "Sure," she was already walking away. I lowered my head out of habit and began working on a task that wasn't even mine. On my 30th birthday, I was working late again, alone. After 3 hours of typing, my eyes burned so much I could barely keep them open. Finally, after saving the last file, the clock in the bottom corner of my screen read 11:47 p.m. Almost forgot. I rubbed my temples and took a small box from the drawer. A tiny cream cake from the convenience store, costing 15 yuan. It had been sitting so long that the cream had melted into a mess. I carefully stuck a candle in it and lit it with a lighter. The small flame flickered in the empty office, illuminating my face, plain in every possible way. "Happy birthday to me," I whispered, blowing out the candle. 2. As an alpha, I was probably the least impressive type. Average looks, ordinary build, boring style. So plain that I'd vanish into a crowd instantly. In a society that prized strong, dominant alphas, someone like me, timid, non-confrontational, wasn't even worth an Omega's glance. Still, I held some fantasies about the life ahead. I'd never dated before. My biggest wish was that when the state assigned partners at 30, I'd be matched with a soft, delicate Omega. I would pamper her, treat her well, and cherish her completely. At home, I trembled as I opened the state matchmaking app. At midnight today, the system would pair me with the most suitable partner. Supposedly, a match over 90% would mean pheromones aligned so perfectly that it would spark love at first sight. Ding! Match successful. I held my breath and stared at the message on the screen. Match partner, George. Pheromone compatibility, 98%. I nearly dropped my phone. The Empire's most prestigious noble family. My finger hovered over the screen, hesitant to click for details. How could a commoner alpha like me deserve such an exalted noble? If George saw my profile, he'd probably cancel the match immediately. Then suddenly, a message popped up. "Hi, I'm George. So happy to be matched with you." I widened my eyes. Such a lively tone, such cute emojis. This had to be a delicate Omega. And he seemed genuinely pleased with me. My fingers trembled uncontrollably as I took 3 minutes to type a full reply. "Hi, I'm Forrest. It's an honor to be matched with you. No need to be so formal." The reply came instantly. "From now on, we'll be the closest people to each other. Are you free to meet tomorrow? I know a really great restaurant." A warm feeling surged in my chest. It felt as though all the luck I'd saved over 30 years had been spent in this very moment. 3. The restaurant we agreed to meet at was a casual chain, with meals under 500 yuan per person. I felt both touched and a little guilty. An Omega of noble birth, so gentle and considerate, choosing a place I could afford. After work, I dug out my passbook and checked the numbers again. I'd saved 200,000 yuan over the years, not a fortune, but enough for a decent wedding and a few nice pieces of jewelry for my Omega. My wardrobe had only 3 suits, the priciest one bought last year's year-end sale for 299 yuan. I took it out, ironed it carefully, and found a deep blue tie I'd never worn, a 19.9 yuan promotional gift from the supermarket. Lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep. My mind couldn't help but sketch George's image: small stature, soft chestnut curls, a dimpled smile, the perfect Omega. I imagined a warm, cozy home, mornings making breakfast for him, returning from work to see that gentle smile. My phone buzzed again. "Can't sleep, really looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. Forrest, what's your favorite color?" I couldn't help but smile. It seemed my Omega was just as excited as I was, unable to sleep. "Blue," I replied, adding, "Get some rest, see you tomorrow." "Got it, good night." That night, I had the sweetest dream I'd ever had in 30 years. 4. I stood in front of the restroom mirror at the restaurant, adjusting my tie for the 3rd time. The cheap suit's fabric was rough and stiff, rubbing against the glands on the back of my neck and sending a wave of discomfort through me. The man in the mirror looked pale, dark circles hanging under his eyes. "Calm down, Forrest," I muttered to myself. "It's just a date." Cold water from the tap splashed onto my face, slightly soothing my frayed nerves. I had arrived an hour early at the restaurant, just to give myself enough time to calm down. The waiter led me to a window seat. It was peak dining time, the surrounding tables quickly filled with people. I ordered a glass of lemonade and sipped it slowly, glancing toward the entrance from time to time. My phone showed 6:55 p.m., 5 minutes before the scheduled time. I smoothed my hair, freshly trimmed at the barber, making sure every strand lay perfectly in place. At 6:59, the restaurant door opened, and a chime rang. I instinctively stood up, a smile of anticipation already on my lips, then froze. 5. There stood a man. No, calling him the man felt far too understated. He was at least 2 meters tall, shoulders so broad they nearly blocked the doorway, long golden hair tied back, revealing a sharply handsome face. His deep blue eyes seemed like a stormy ocean, scanning the restaurant with an innate air of superiority. Most striking of all was the pheromone. Even across the room, I could feel the intense pressure of it, like the ocean before a storm, making the glands on the back of my neck tingle instantly. Enigma. The word popped into my mind, and my legs nearly gave out beneath me. A being rarer and stronger than an alpha, one of only a few hundred in the entire alliance, almost all hailing from ancient noble families. He scanned the room and locked his gaze on my dumbfounded self. Forrest? His voice was deep, cello-like, a stark contrast to the lively, cute tone of his earlier messages. My throat tightened as if gripped by an invisible hand, unable to speak. I could only nod stiffly. He strode forward, each step making the surrounding diners instinctively shrink back. Alphas lowered their heads with visible discomfort, Omegas blushed and subconsciously touched the backs of their necks. I'm George. He sat across from me, his body so large that it made the table feel cramped. Seems like the system didn't tell you my gender. I finally found my voice. No, it didn't. It only showed your surname. I see. George tilted his head slightly, a gesture that would have been cute in anyone else but was imposing on him. So you were expecting an Omega? My fingers clenched the tablecloth unconsciously. 6. 30 years of dreams, my frugal savings for a wife, all the fantasies of a petite, adorable partner, they shattered into dust in that instant. I thought. My voice was dry, like sandpaper scraping. George's expression suddenly changed. The natural pride faded, his lips curved downward slightly, and the blue in his eyes glimmered with moisture, making him look unexpectedly vulnerable. I knew it. He gave a wry smile. Every alpha reacts this way when they see my true identity. Forrest, if you want to cancel the match, I completely understand. My heart clenched. This powerful enigma looked so fragile right now. No, I'm not. I instinctively reached out, then pulled back halfway. Just a little surprised. George looked up, and the hope flickering in his eyes made my chest tighten. Then would you like to continue this date? The warm restaurant lights highlighted his chiseled features, casting soft shadows. Up close, his eyelashes were astonishingly long, shading the skin beneath his eyes. Yes. The word slipped out before I could stop it, even surprising myself. George smiled, and his whole presence seemed to brighten, easing the tension in the room. 7. He waved over a waiter and confidently ordered a few signature dishes. The steak here is really good. Not Michelin 3-star quality, but tender and perfectly sauced, he said, pouring me a glass of red wine. I stared at the glass, remembering the menu prices. One glass alone cost as much as a meal I normally ate. What's wrong? George noticed my hesitation immediately. Nothing. I forced a smile and took a small sip. The liquid slid down my throat, rich and full-bodied, a taste I had never experienced before. Much better than the 99 yuan supermarket wine I usually drank. Forrest, can I ask what you do for work? George cut his steak with the elegance of a movie noble. I work in finance at a trading company. Just an ordinary employee. I looked down at my awkward knife grip, feeling a sudden pang of inadequacy. Finance work takes patience and attention to detail. That's impressive. George's gaze was sincere. I can't do it. I get a headache just looking at numbers. The conversation gradually became smoother. George skillfully guided it, asking about my job, hobbies, and even childhood. His humor was just right, making me laugh aloud a few times. For brief moments, I almost forgot that the person across from me was an enigma, not just a charming date. 8. Actually, this is the second time the system has matched me, George said suddenly, his fingers lightly tracing the rim of his wine glass. I looked up. The first time. Also an alpha, he replied with a bitter smile. They cancelled the match the moment they saw my profile. You know, most alphas can't handle the idea of being marked by an enigma. My fork clattered against the plate. Being marked by an enigma meant a shift in status. Socially, you moved from alpha to something closer to omega. Physiologically, it wasn't a full transformation, but socially, it changed everything. So this time, I hid my gender. George's voice dropped. I wanted, at least to meet once. If the other party couldn't handle it, then. His lashes drooped, casting a fragile shadow in the warm light. I suddenly remembered a large dog we once had at home. Despite its size, it would look up with the most pitiful, puppy-like eyes whenever scolded. "I'm not going to cancel the match," I blurted out, startling myself. George lifted his head sharply, incredulity flashing in his blue eyes. "Really?" "Yeah," I nodded, forcing myself to ignore the tingling in the glands at the back of my neck. "We can just see how it goes for now." 9. I knew this decision was utterly foolish. How could an ordinary alpha like me be worthy of a noble Enigma? Not to mention the risk of being marked. But seeing George's expression light up instantly made all the rational arguments in my head vanish. Dinner ended in an odd, harmonious mood. George insisted on paying, despite my repeated protests that we should split it. "Next time, it's your turn," he said with that radiant smile that made my heart skip a beat. Outside, the night wind brushed against my flushed face. George offered to walk me home, but I politely declined, saying I wanted a bit of time to clear my head. "Then at least let me walk with you to the subway station," he said, leaving no room for refusal. We walked side by side on the sidewalk. His height made me tilt my head slightly to see his profile. The moonlight outlined his high nose and sharp jawline, almost unreal in its perfection. "We're here," I said, stopping at the subway entrance. "Thank you for tonight." Before I could finish, George turned to face me, close enough to smell the oceanic scent of his pheromones, mingled with a faint trace of cologne. "Forrest," he whispered, "thank you for giving me this chance." Then, without warning, he released a wave of pheromones. It hit me like a tidal wave. My knees went weak, and I had to brace against the wall to keep from collapsing. The glands on the back of my neck burned as if on fire, blood rushing to that area. My alpha instincts screamed, "Run, resist, never submit." But I froze in place, gasping, waiting for the dizziness to pass. When I could finally focus again, I caught a fleeting, almost mischievous glint in George's expression, disappearing as quickly as it appeared. The next moment, his gentle smile returned. 10. "Sorry, sometimes I can't control it," he said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Do you want me to walk you home?" "And no, that's fine." I straightened up with effort. "I have work tomorrow, so I should get going." As I turned toward the subway, I felt his gaze follow me like an invisible chain. The train windows reflected my pale face. I touched the heated glands at the back of my neck, still throbbing. My phone buzzed, a message from George. "Had a great time tonight. Next time, can I plan it? Omega?" That cute emoticon was absurdly out of place for the towering Enigma in reality. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. "Okay, take care on your way home." I didn't know why I was doing this. Why would an ordinary alpha agree to a date with an Enigma? Why didn't I cancel the match like every other alpha would? As the train entered a tunnel and the reflection disappeared, I seemed to see the answer. The curve of his mouth when he pretended to pout, the sparkling blue of his eyes when talking about marine life, the genuine tremor in his voice when he said, "Thank you for giving me this chance." These details were inexplicably etched into my mind. 11. The buzz of my phone woke me from sleep. "Good morning. Free for lunch today? I know a great place." A smiley face followed George's message. I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard for a long time before typing. 2 weeks had passed since that initial, mind-altering first meeting. George texted almost daily to ask me out, and I, as if possessed, found myself agreeing every single time. "Sure, but my lunch break is only an hour." Finally, I replied. The phone buzzed immediately. "No problem. I'll wait for you downstairs at your office at noon." I buried my face in my pillow and took a deep breath. Since meeting George, my life felt like a washing machine on spin cycle, everything spinning, completely out of control. "Forrest, are you crazy?" I muttered to my reflection in the bathroom mirror. "He's an Enigma, a noble." The water splashing on my face couldn't wash away the deep blue of his eyes from my mind. 12. The midday sun scorched the asphalt mercilessly. I stood in the shade of the office building, adjusting my tie. The shirt I was wearing was 3 years old, the collar was yellowed, and the cuffs frayed. Details I usually ignored now felt painfully obvious. A black car slid silently to the curb. The door opened, and George stepped out, casually dressed in a white shirt and dark trousers, his golden hair gleaming in the sunlight. "Have you been waiting long?" he asked with a smile, and his oceanic pheromones immediately enveloped me. "Jay just got here," I stammered, instinctively stepping back, my neck glands already tingling. George seemed to notice my discomfort and slightly restrained his pheromones. "Get in. I've reserved a table at the restaurant." The car's AC was blasting, and the leather seats smelled faintly of freshness. I sat stiffly, careful not to dirty the luxurious interior. "Work going well?" George asked. "Yeah, same as always," I muttered, avoiding mention of the mountain of tasks my supervisor had dumped on me that morning. 13. The car stopped in front of a high-rise building with a glass facade. The doorman respectfully opened the door. The elevator took us straight to the top floor. A sky-high restaurant unfolded before my eyes, offering a panoramic view of the city. The light refracted from crystal chandeliers stung my eyes. "Your table is ready," the manager greeted us personally, glancing over me briefly. The menu had no prices. I stared at the fancy French dish names, fingers unconsciously clutching the napkin. "Anything you'd like to try?" George asked enthusiastically. "Why you choose? I don't really understand these." George nodded and confidently ordered several dishes and a bottle of wine in fluent French. When the waiter left, George suddenly leaned forward. "Forrest, are you worried about the price?" My ears immediately flushed. "And no, today it's on me," George said with a smile. "Consider it a celebration of our 2 weeks of knowing each other." Dish after dish arrived, each looking like a work of art, though the portions were disappointingly small. I carefully used the silverware, afraid of making any noise. George ate comfortably, occasionally commenting on the origin of ingredients and cooking techniques. "Try this." He suddenly cut a piece of steak and offered it to my mouth. "The texture is special." I froze. The gesture was far too intimate, and a few curious glances had already landed on us. But refusing would feel rude, so I leaned slightly forward and took the piece. George's eyes lit up as if he'd been rewarded. The steak was indeed delicious, melting in my mouth, yet I couldn't focus on the taste at all. My entire attention was on the silver fork that had just touched George's lips. When it came time to pay, the waiter respectfully handed over a black card. I caught a glimpse of the total and nearly slid off my chair. It was equivalent to 3 months of my salary. 14. "Did you like it here?" George asked as we left the restaurant. "The food was great, but too expensive," I admitted honestly. "You really didn't need to come to such a fancy place." George raised an eyebrow. "What do you usually have for lunch?" "The company cafeteria, or convenience store rice balls," I replied, checking the time. "Ah, it's almost 1. I should get back." "I'll take you," he offered. "No, really." I waved him off. "It's close to the office. I'll just take the subway." George's expression suddenly changed. "The subway? Yeah, it's convenient. Just 3 stops," I said, pointing to the entrance nearby. "Want to try it?" I swear I said it casually, but George's eyes lit up. "Sure." And so, one of the most prestigious enigmas in the Alliance squeezed into a subway car with me just before the afternoon rush. "Swipe like this," I demonstrated with my transit card. George watched intently, clumsy but adorable in his movements. The car grew crowded, and George had to bend slightly to avoid hitting his head. Though he restrained his pheromones well, his striking appearance drew plenty of attention. A young Omega girl even blushed and sneakily snapped a photo. "You take the subway often?" George asked softly in my ear, his warm breath brushing it. "Every day, to and from work," I replied, forcing myself to ignore the tickle on my ear. "Convenient and saves money," he murmured, nodding thoughtfully. When we exited, he almost got his coat caught in the turnstile. I grabbed him quickly. The instant my fingers brushed his wrist, a tiny jolt ran through me, and I instinctively let go. "Thanks," George said with a smile. "Can we meet again tomorrow? I want to try those convenience store rice balls you mentioned." 15. From then on, George began appearing frequently in my life. Sometimes for lunch at upscale restaurants, other times at ordinary fast food spots. Oddly, he seemed increasingly interested in everyday life, even asking me to take him grocery shopping for discounted items. "This really only costs $9.99? George asked in disbelief, holding a pack of promotional tissues. "Yeah, every Wednesday this store has special deals," I said, carefully maneuvering the cart through the crowded aisles. George enthusiastically tossed various discounted items into the cart: snacks, cleaning products, anything that caught his eye. I couldn't help but laugh at his excitement. "Have you never been grocery shopping before?" "No," George said, examining a pack of instant noodles. "My household has someone to do it." That comment reminded me of the gap between us. I quietly put the noodles back on the shelf. "This one's not good. Get this brand. It tastes more authentic," I suggested. At checkout, George tried to pay, but I firmly stopped him. "Today it's on me. Last time, you treated me to that ridiculously expensive restaurant." George paused, then smiled genuinely. "All right." That night, he sent a photo of his prepared instant noodles with ham and a fried egg. Caption: "Better than Michelin 3 stars." I looked at the phone and couldn't help smiling. 16. Things changed during the 4th week of knowing George. That morning, I was called into my supervisor's office the moment I arrived. "Forrest, sit," he said unusually warmly, even pouring me a cup of tea himself. I heard you know George. The tea nearly spilled from my hands. How did you know? Oh, you can't hide something like that, he replied, rubbing his hands together. It's like this. Our company has a project that requires cooperation with his family's shipping company. Could you help introduce us? By the time I left the office, my back was soaked with cold sweat. Colleagues looked at me differently now, curiously, deferentially, and even a few female coworkers who usually dumped work on me offered to make coffee. At noon, George was waiting downstairs as usual. I got in the car and immediately asked, "Did you do something?" "Ha!" George looked innocent. "My supervisor was unusually polite today and even asked to meet your family." I clenched my fists. "George, don't interfere with my work." His expression shifted from surprise to understanding. "I just gave a little heads up, saying you were my friend." He paused. "Were they bullying you before?" "That's not important," I said, taking a deep breath. "I don't need special treatment. I'm just an ordinary employee, working and living on my own." The air in the car thickened. George looked at me quietly, his blue eyes unreadable. I braced myself for mockery or anger. After all, a noble like him probably had never been contradicted like this. But unexpectedly, George nodded. "Sorry, I wasn't thinking. It won't happen again." His reaction left the long speech I had prepared stuck in my throat. 17. However, George suddenly leaned in so close I could count each of his eyelashes. "You have to promise me one thing." What? "Come to my place for dinner tonight." He flashed that smile I couldn't refuse. "I promise I won't call a chef. Just the two of us. I'll cook for you." "You can cook?" I exclaimed, eyes wide in surprise. "No," George said matter-of-factly, "so you have to teach me." And just like that, we made a strange agreement. That night, in his absurdly large kitchen, I guided George step by step through chopping vegetables and cooking rice. He learned seriously, though his knife skills were atrocious and the rice only half-cooked. Yet somehow, the stir-fried vegetables turned out edible. "Not bad, right?" George proudly put a bite into my bowl. "Yeah, it's good," I nodded, feeling my heart melt somewhere deep inside. At 3 in the morning, my phone rang while I dreamed of falling into the sea. The briny water filled my nose, suffocating me with terrifying realism. "Hello?" I rasped, fumbling to answer. "Forrest," George's weak voice came through, heavy with labored breathing. "Help me." I snapped awake and bolted upright. "George, what's wrong?" "Heat, early," his voice faltered, trembling with intense pain. "Suppressants, useless." Enigma's heat cycles were fiercer than Alpha's, capable of affecting Omegas within several kilometers. "I'm coming," I said, throwing on clothes in a panic. "Hold on," I told him. After hanging up, I realized what I'd committed to. An Alpha voluntarily rushing to an Enigma in heat was like a lamb walking into a wolf's den. Yet George's agonized breaths left me no choice. 18. The streets were empty late at night. I flagged a taxi and gave George's apartment address. A block away, I sensed something unusual. The air carried a faint scent of the ocean, growing stronger as I approached the building. Chaos had already erupted in the lobby. Several Omega residents sat flushed and anxious while medics checked on them. Security tried to maintain order, their foreheads beaded with sweat. "Sir, you can't enter." The guard blocked me. "There's an Enigma in heat inside. We're evacuating residents." "I'm his match," I said, showing a photo of George and me on my phone. "He's on the top floor and needs help." The guard hesitated but eventually let me pass. "The elevator is stopped. You'll need to take the fire stairs." Halfway up 20 flights, my legs trembled, not from exhaustion, but from the increasingly overwhelming pheromones. George's ocean scent crashed over me like real waves, battering my glands. Alpha instincts screamed to flee, but I gritted my teeth and kept climbing. The top floor corridor was empty, everyone had clearly evacuated. George's apartment door was ajar. I pushed it open and staggered as a wave of pheromones hit me. "George," I called, my voice lost beneath my own heavy breathing. The apartment was pitch dark, except for faint moans coming from the bedroom. I felt along the walls, each step like fighting a hurricane. The bedroom door was half open. In the moonlight, I saw George curled in the center of the bed, his massive frame suddenly appearing vulnerable. Sweat drenched him, golden hair stuck to his face, hands gripping the sheets so hard his knuckles were white. 19. "George." I approached carefully. He jerked his head up, blue eyes gleaming like a predator in the darkness. Recognizing me softened the glare slightly, though his body remained as tense as a drawn bow. Empty suppressants lay scattered on the nightstand. I picked one up, the strongest kind, but it was obviously useless against an Enigma's heat. "How can I help you?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. George shut his eyes tightly in pain. "Go. I'll hurt you." A stronger wave of pheromones hit me, knees buckling, nearly bringing me to the floor. My neck glands burned, all the blood seemed to rush to that spot. Alpha instincts roared, danger, humiliation, absolutely unacceptable. Yet seeing George in agony, I made my choice. Mark me, I said, firmer than I expected. George's eyes snapped open. Do you know what you're saying? I do. I turned, lifting my hair to expose the heated gland. Come on, before I change my mind. The mattress sank as George approached from behind. His hot breath brushed my gland, sending shivers through me. I closed my eyes, bracing for the pain. Are you sure? His voice was low, hoarse. Just temporarily, right? It'll fade in a month. I tried to sound casual. George didn't answer. The next second, his sharp canines sank into the gland. I arched in pain, fingers gripping the sheets. The Enigma pheromone surged like a tsunami through my bloodstream, washing over every nerve. I'd never felt anything like it. Pain and pleasure, fear and comfort intertwined. It was like being pulled into the deep sea, only to discover I could breathe underwater before suffocating. Eventually, George released the bite, gently licking the small wound. His arms wrapped around my waist, pulling me close. My back pressed against his blazing chest. I could feel his heartbeat gradually steadying. Thank you, he whispered, voice softer than ever. Exhausted, I had no strength to reply. The Enigma pheromones flowed through me, bringing a strange sense of calm. My eyelids grew heavy, and I finally lost consciousness in George's embrace. 20. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, waking me groggily. I realized I was lying on George's bed, alone. The bedroom door was closed, but muffled voices carried from outside. I tried to sit up, but my entire body ached as if run over by a truck. The bite on the back of my neck burned fiercely, a reminder of last night. It's been handled, the media won't report it. George's voice drifted faintly. Master, you took too many risks. A different male voice spoke. If that alpha lost control, he won't. George's tone was sharp. Forrest isn't like the others, but he's a civilian. If you... Enough, George interrupted. This ends here. I quietly lay back down, pretending to have just woken up. A few minutes later, George entered, smiling the moment he saw me awake. How do you feel? He sat on the edge of the bed, gently brushing the mark on the back of my neck. His careful touch was a stark contrast to last night. Okay, I said, trying to move my shoulders. Just a bit sore. George handed me a glass of water. Sorry, I didn't expect the heat to start early. The doctor said it's due to recent emotional fluctuations. Doctor? I took the water, remembering the conversation I'd overheard. My family doctor came by and gave you some supplements, George said, his gaze flickering. Thank you for last night, I added softly. In the sunlight, he looked as composed and elegant as ever. His golden hair was neatly tied back, shirt buttoned to the top, concealing the bite on his collarbone, my uncontrolled mark. Only the faint shadow under his eyes hinted at the pain he endured. 21. Hungry? I had breakfast prepared, George said, changing the subject. The spread was extravagantly abundant. I sipped porridge slowly, aware of George's eyes fixed on me. What is it? I asked. Nothing, he smiled. I just didn't expect you to go this far for me. I looked down at my bowl. Anyone would help. No, they wouldn't. George's voice was quiet. Most alphas would rather see me suffer than let themselves be marked by an enigma, even temporarily. I had no reply. He was right. Alpha pride ran deep. Being marked by an enigma, even temporarily, was a social demotion and a massive humiliation. But watching George suffer last night made all that pride feel meaningless. Don't go to work today, George said, handing me a slice of jam-covered bread. I already called in for you. You contacted my company? I frowned. Just an email, George shrugged. Saying you weren't feeling well. I put down the fork. George, I don't need special treatment. This isn't special treatment, it's just... He paused. I'm worried about you. Thanks, but I prefer to handle these things myself. I tried to keep my voice steady. George squinted. Are you angry? Why? I'm not angry, I exhaled. I just don't want to owe you too much. Oh me? His expression turned odd. Forrest, you saved me last night. I'm the one who owes you. 22. The argument ended abruptly when George's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, frowning. I have to take this. He stepped to the balcony, voice low, but I caught a few words. Acquisition, contract, this afternoon. After the call, George returned, looking apologetic. Sorry, the company needed urgent attention. Stay here and rest today. I'll pick you up for dinner tonight. No, I want to go home. I stood, desperate for solitude. My clothes? They're being washed, he said, gesturing to the wardrobe. Can you wear mine for now? Wearing George's shirt felt strange. His scent lingered in the fabric, the sleeves were too long, and the hem nearly covered my thighs. In the mirror, I looked like a child sneaking into adult clothes, the mark on my neck boldly signaling possession. George personally drove me home. On the way, he tried to speak several times but ended up just turning on the music. At my apartment, he suddenly grabbed my wrist. "Forrest, about last night. It was a special situation." "I understand," I cut in quickly. "It doesn't mean anything." His expression froze. "I know," I forced a smile. "Thank you for bringing me home." 23. Over the next 2 weeks, George's pheromone mark gradually faded, but our relationship subtly shifted. Meanwhile, the office atmosphere changed. My supervisor stopped piling extra work on me. Colleagues looked at me with a mix of respect and curiosity. Even the company president once paused in the hallway to greet me. I knew it was because of George, and it made my chest tighten. One Friday afternoon, I overheard 2 coworkers in the print room. "Did you hear? The company acquisition was cancelled because of that Forrest." "Really? He's just in finance. His boyfriend's a young master." Apparently, the representative from the acquiring company treated Forrest poorly, and the next day the acquisition plan was scrapped. The papers in my hands scattered. The 2 coworkers awkwardly zipped their mouths shut and left. After work, George waited in the usual spot. I got in silently. He immediately sensed something. "What's wrong?" "The acquisition, did you intervene?" I asked bluntly. George tapped the steering wheel. "Who told you?" "So it's true." The tightness in my chest worsened. "George, I don't need you doing this. I just didn't want to see you bullied." His tone was cold. "That's not the point." I raised my voice. "This is my work, my life. I don't need you acting like a guardian and fixing everything." The car fell silent. George's expression was unfamiliar, blue eyes flickering dangerously. "Do you know how many people would give anything for my protection? I'm not them." I drew a deep breath. "George, I like you, not your name or your privileges." George froze, surprised by the confession. Then his expression softened. "Forrest, take me home," I said, leaning back, exhausted. "I need time to think." The car drove in silence to my apartment. Once parked, George grabbed my hand. "I'm sorry. You're right, I shouldn't interfere in your work." I was surprised by his concession. It wasn't typical of a proud Enigma. "But one thing you must know." George leaned close, his ocean-scented pheromones enveloping me. "I'm serious about you, Forrest. This isn't a game." His lips touched mine, gentle, firm. It wasn't a kiss of desire, but of promise. 24. Monday morning, I dragged myself into the office building, dark circles under my eyes. The entire weekend had been consumed by thoughts of George, leaving sleep a luxury I couldn't afford. "Forrest," the receptionist called after me. "A gentleman left this for you." She handed me a sleek black envelope, the gold-embossed emblem gleaming under the light. As soon as my fingers touched it, her eyes lit up with curiosity. "Thanks," I muttered, shoving it into my briefcase and fleeing toward the elevator. In the restroom stall, I carefully opened the envelope. Inside were a note and a check. The handwriting on the note was cold and precise. "Thank you for keeping George company during this time. The enclosed amount should compensate you for your time and other losses. Our family's heir requires a partner of appropriate standing. I trust you understand." I gasped at the number on the check, my fingers trembling uncontrollably, crumpling the edges. In George's father's eyes, I was nothing more than a toy to be paid off. My phone vibrated. A message from George. "Are you free for lunch today? I want to see you." I stared at the screen, a heavy weight pressing on my chest. How could I respond? Tell him I'd received his father's breakup fee, or pretend nothing happened, continuing this doomed relationship? In the end, I sent just one word: busy. For the next 3 days, I declined every invitation from George under the guise of work. His messages shifted from confused to worried, then anxious. "Forrest, what's going on? Why aren't you answering me? I'm coming to your place now. We need to talk." The last message came just as I was packing up all the things George had given me in my apartment. Each item held memories. Now they were neatly packed in boxes, ready to return to their owner. 25. The doorbell rang, and my hands shook so much I could barely hold the box. George stood outside, rain-soaked hair clinging to his face, blue eyes full of anxiety. "What's going on with you?" he demanded, urgency in his voice I'd never heard before. "Why didn't you answer my calls?" I stepped aside and gestured to the boxes on the coffee table. "These are your things. Anne." I pulled the check from my wallet. "Give this back to your father." George's expression shifted from confusion to shock, then froze into an unnervingly calm stillness. He picked up the check, examined the signature on the back, and his lips twitched. "My father approached you." I forced myself to meet his eyes. "He made it very clear. The heir requires a partner of appropriate standing. So you just obeyed?" His voice sharpened suddenly. "Didn't even try to resist?" His words cut me deeply. What else could I do? I'm just an ordinary alpha, no family background, no status, only 200,000 in savings. What can I possibly give you? Do you think we could ever have a future? George grabbed my wrist with surprising strength, making me frown. Do you think I care about that? Of course you don't. I yanked my wrist free. You've had everything since birth. But I'm different, George. Every time we walk into those high-end restaurants, every time I notice how others look at me, every time I realize the gap between us, I feel like a clown. George froze, stunned by my outburst. Rain dripped from his hair onto the wooden floor, forming tiny puddles. So that's your answer, he said softly, the hurt in his voice twisting my chest. Because you're scared, you choose to run. I'm not scared. I'm clear-headed. I clenched my fists, nails digging into my palms. We're from completely different worlds, George. Then what? He suddenly raised his voice. I can give up all that, family, title, wealth. If that's what's standing between us, I'd rather have none of it. I stared, stunned. Do you even realize what you're saying? Crystal clear. George stepped forward, cupping my face in his hands, forcing me to meet his gaze. Forrest, this is the first time I've liked someone. Do you think I'd let you go easily? His thumb brushed my tear-streaked cheek, and I realized I'd been crying. All the self-doubt, fear, and longing I'd suppressed surged out as burning tears. 26. I can't even buy you a proper gift, I choked out. George smiled, gentle enough to shatter my heart. Who cares about that? His forehead pressed to mine. Forrest, I want you, not what you can give me. I opened my mouth but couldn't make a sound. Give me a week, George whispered. If after a week you still choose to end this, I'll never bother you again. He released me, picked up the box of his gifts, glanced back once, and walked away. The door closed, and I collapsed to the floor, tears blurring my vision. The next week passed exactly as he said, no messages from George. Office gossip about me gradually died down, life seemed to revert to its pre-George state, calm, dull, safe. But each night, lying in bed, I found myself glancing at my phone. Walking past our usual restaurants, my pace slowed unconsciously. Even catching the scent of the ocean made the fading mark on my neck ache faintly. On the 7th night, I couldn't resist going to the supermarket we had visited together. Standing in front of the instant noodle aisle, memories hit me. He had been like a curious child, comparing flavors, nearly dropping everything at the end. Need some help? The familiar voice came from behind. I spun around, nearly colliding with a shopping cart. 27. The person pushing the cart was a young man wearing a baseball cap, brim pulled low, but a strand of golden hair and that familiar oceanic scent gave him away. George, I could hardly believe my eyes. What are you doing here? He looked up, a mischievous smile lighting his blue eyes. Buying instant noodles. Too many choices, needed an expert opinion. I finally noticed his outfit. Plain jeans, white sneakers, a cartoon t-shirt, his signature golden hair casually tied in a ponytail. No trace of the natural aristocratic aura, just a handsome ordinary young man. Your clothes, I stammered. Like them. George spun around. All affordable brands, cost me less than 500. He lowered his voice. To be honest, way more comfortable than I imagined. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What exactly are you doing? Proving a point. He picked up 2 packs of instant noodles, suddenly serious. Forrest, this week I moved out of the family apartment, rented a small place in the south of the city, got a regular job, learned to take the subway, use a washing machine, bargain at the market. He paused. I wanted you to know, I'm still me. My heart raced. Your father knows. Yes. George's smile faded slightly. He was so angry he stripped me of all privileges in the family business and froze most of my accounts. He shrugged casually. Honestly, it feels like a weight lifted off my shoulders. I stared, stunned. Why go this far? I asked softly. George took my hand. Because I want to pursue you as an equal. Under the supermarket lights, his blue eyes shone brighter than ever. How big is your little place? I asked, almost without thinking. His eyes lit up. 1 bedroom, 1 living room. Bathrooms so small you can't even turn around. Kitchen's half the size of yours. He leaned closer, hopeful in his tone. But the balcony faces south, lots of sunlight. Sounds nice, I said, trying to keep a corner of my mouth from lifting. Want to see it? George blinked. I got a new sofa. Not as comfy as yours, but I couldn't hold back anymore. I laughed. You're inviting me to your place. I'm inviting you to consider a possibility. His expression turned serious. Forrest, I'm not asking you to decide right away, but at least give us a chance. Start from scratch, as equals, and see how far we can go. Amid the mundane supermarket announcements, passing carts, complaints about sold-out eggs, I made the most extraordinary decision of my life. 28. Let's go see that balcony now, I said. George's small apartment was in a regular southern district, just as he had said, tiny but cozy. A second-hand sofa sat in the living room, a few prints hung on the walls, and a tiny succulent sat on the kitchen counter. I'm keeping it alive, George said proudly. 3 days and counting. I couldn't help laughing. Impressive, little master. Don't call me that. He made a funny face. I'm just a regular office worker now, still paying rent. He led me through every corner, his tone full of pride, the same pride he had when showing off his family mansion. Finally, we stood on the south-facing balcony, the sunset casting gold on neighboring rooftops. Well? George leaned on the railing, his profile bathed in golden light. I didn't answer, just kissed him. George wrapped his arms around my waist gently, as if handling something fragile. When we pulled apart, his blue eyes flickered with a light I didn't dare interpret. Does this mean yes? He whispered. I guess it's giving us a chance, I corrected, though the corner of my mouth couldn't stop curling upward. But I should warn you, civilian life isn't as romantic as you think. Rent rises, neighbors fight, washing machines sometimes swallow coins. Sounds perfect, George interrupted with a smile. Especially if you're here with me.